Aden, 1967. A narrow alleyway, a British three-man crew inside a six-wheeled armoured car smaller than a transit van. Outside, several hundred men closing in. The commander traverses the turret slowly. The 76mm gun swings left. The crowd stops. Nobody fires. The standoff lasts 11 minutes. Then the crowd disperses. No shots fired. No casualties. The vehicle that just ended a potential massacre weighed 11 tons and cost less than a London bus. Its name was the Alvis Saladin. Over the next 40 years, it would fight in more wars than any armoured vehicle Britain ever built. In conflicts so forgotten that most military historians cannot name them. Before this video ends, you will understand why the same vehicle fought on both sides of the same war, why British SAS soldiers in Oman called it the most reliable equipment they had operated alongside, and why a wheeled armoured car designed in 1954 was still killing people in 2009. The Saladin was never supposed to be a combat vehicle. It was designed to police an empire that was already dying. That gap, between what it was built for and what it actually did is the story of the most versatile fighting vehicle Britain ever made. Britain in 1945. The empire stretched across every continent. Dozens of colonies, all of them restless, many actively insurgent. The army needed one vehicle that could control crowds in Malaya, chase bandits in Kenya, patrol mountain roads in Cyprus, and fight Soviet armor in Germany, all from the same hull, same crew, same spare parts. The brief that landed at Alvis in Coventry in the late 1940s was, in retrospect, impossible. Alvis built it anyway. The vehicle that emerged was deceptively simple. 6 wheels on 3 axles, all 6 driven, all 4 rear wheels steerable at low speed. A Rolls-Royce B 88-cylinder producing 170 horsepower, top speed 72 kilometers per hour, range 400 kilometers, 3 crew in a welded steel hull with 32mm frontal armor, and at the center of the turret, a 76mm L 5A1 low-pressure gun with 42 rounds. That gun could kill a T-34 at combat range, demolish a building with 1 round, or be pointed at a crowd without firing and achieve exactly the result needed. A gun that could do all 3 things was not an accident. It was the entire design philosophy made physical. The Saladin entered service in 1958. Within 12 months, it was in Cyprus, where Eoka guerrillas were bombing British installations on mountain roads too narrow for tracked vehicles. The Saladin's 6-wheel drive and tight turning radius let it operate where anything heavier stopped. Its gun, too large to be ignored, too controlled to provoke, became the instrument of a deterrence that saved lives on both sides, but Cyprus was just the opening act. Aden, 1963 to 1967, Britain's most violent colonial withdrawal. Saladins operated in both urban alleys and mountain passes where no tracked vehicle could follow. Crews developed a tactic never written in any doctrine manual. Drive to within 200 meters of a fortified position, fire 2 ranging rounds. If the position did not surrender, the 3rd round came through the wall. It worked every time. But here is what made Aden different from every other deployment. And this is the detail that changes the entire story. In Aden, the Saladin faced not guerrillas with rifles, but organized forces with Soviet-supplied RPGs. A direct hit on 32mm frontal armor was survivable. A hit on the side was not. Crews learned to use maneuverability not for escape, but for constant repositioning, keeping the strongest armor between themselves and the threat. That lesson was not in the training manual when the Saladin arrived. It was written in the manual when it left. 3 years of combat had turned a colonial policing vehicle into a doctrine. Then came the detail nobody talks about. In 1965, India and Pakistan went to war. Both had purchased Saladins from Britain. Both deployed them. Pakistani Saladins engaged Indian armor at the Battle of Asal Uda. Indian Saladins were operating on the same front, on the opposite side. The same vehicle, same gun, same spare parts catalog, firing at each other across a contested border. The Saladin was so capable that both sides of the same war wanted it. Oman, 1971 to 1976, the Dhofar Rebellion. a Marxist insurgency threatening to give the Soviet Union access to the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which a third of the world's oil would pass. Britain deployed the SAS in secret. Alongside them, 36 Saladins, crewed by British loan service officers, held mountain roads the terrain made impassable for tracked vehicles. One declassified SAS after-action report describes a Saladin crew holding a road single-handedly for 4 hours against 40 armed men while a casualty evacuation completed, hit 3 times by RPG rounds. Still firing, all 3 crewmen survived. The technical reason for that Dhofar survival, the Saladin's V-section lower hull and sloped upper surfaces caused RPG-shaped charge warheads to strike at oblique angles, frequently failing full penetration. The designers in Coventry in 1954 did not know they were building this capability in. The physics did not care. The crews in Dhofar in 1974 were alive because of an accident of geometry nobody had planned. 1,177 Saladins were built between 1958 and 1972, exported to more than 25 nations: Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Libya, Sudan, Nigeria, Ghana, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Honduras, Lebanon, Yemen, Portugal, West Germany, and more. Nigerian Saladins fought in the Biafran Civil War. Lebanese Saladins were on Beirut streets during the civil war that killed 150,000 people. Sri Lankan Saladins were still in service during the Tamil insurgency in 2009. 51 years after the vehicle entered production, the Saladin did not become obsolete. It became part of the landscape of every conflict the Cold War produced, but history forgot. The Australian modification tells you everything about the Saladin's gun. The Royal Australian Armoured Corps removed the Saladin turret and bolted it onto an M113 armoured personnel carrier. Unauthorized, improvised, tactically brilliant. They called it the Fire Support Vehicle. It gave infantry a 76mm gun that could follow them anywhere. The Australians did not ask permission. They looked at what worked and built it twice. Compare the Saladin to its contemporaries. The American M8 Greyhound had a 37mm gun that could not threaten post-war armor. The French AML carried a 90mm gun, but lacked the Saladin's range and crew protection. The Soviet BR-DM-2 was designed to observe and withdraw. The Saladin was the only wheeled armored car of its generation, built specifically to win a fight rather than report one. That philosophy, seek contact, engage, dominate, was the purest Cold War expression of British armoured doctrine. Cyprus, 1974. Turkey invades. British Saladins at Nicosia Airport hold a perimeter against Turkish armoured forces for days. No shots fired, the Turkish advance stops. The airport stays in international hands. The vehicles that prevented a massacre at a major civilian airport were the same vehicles designed to police colonial streets 20 years earlier. That is not coincidence. That is what happens when a vehicle is built correctly for the human problem it actually has to solve. The Saladin was retired from British service in the early 1970s, replaced by the Scorpion and Scimitar. Faster, better armed modern optics, also tracked, needing transporters, causing road damage, requiring more maintenance in the environments where Britain was actually fighting. The lesson the Saladin had spent 15 years teaching, that wheels beat tracks in counterinsurgency, was not carried forward. The British Army spent the next 30 years relearning it in Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, with vehicles consistently too heavy and too loud for the streets they were sent to control. Several Saladins survive. The Bovington Tank Museum holds a running example. The Norfolk Tank Museum maintains another. At Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka, a Saladin stands as a gate guard at the Armoured Corps Training Centre, the last country to retire it from active service. In the same year, Barack Obama was inaugurated as President of the United States. In Indonesia, Saladins of the Kostrad Cavalry Battalion were still operational as recently as 2014. The vehicle that Alvis built in Coventry to police a dying empire outlasted the empire, outlasted the Cold War, outlasted the doctrine that created it, and is still standing guard in countries that did not exist when it was designed, here is where we are. A British six-wheeled armoured car designed to control colonial crowds, fought on both sides of an Indo-Pakistani war, kept a mountain road open in Oman while the SAS extracted their casualties, stopped a Turkish armoured advance at Nicosia Airport without firing a shot, and was still in frontline service 51 years after it entered production. It was never the most powerful vehicle on any battlefield it entered. It was never the fastest or the best protected. It was the one that showed up, did the job, and kept its crew alive long enough to do it again. That is the Saladin. Subscribe, because next week we cover the vehicle Britain built to replace it, and why the army that retired the Saladin spent the next 3 decades wishing it had not. Had